is I'll start with an overview of SaTC. I'll be very brief because all of you were asked to read the SaTC solicitation, reread it. So presumably you're already pretty much familiar, so just wanted to emphasize the highlights that are particularly important. Then I'll talk about the NIRD Cybersecurity Strategic Plan, and then we'll break to Jeremy, who will start a discussion on the SaTC perspectives and educational proposals by various program officers. And then finally, we'll have questions and answers. Okay, but first, how does NSF work? So NSF is very different from most other funding agencies in which we're bottom up rather than top down. In most agencies, but not all, work by saying, okay, we're interested in solutions for this particular problem and get proposals to solve that particular problem. The National Science Foundation is, of course, interested in science, so it was decided when it was founded to do it the opposite way, that basically we work from bottom up. We issue extremely broad solicitations and see what people come up with. So I view my role as a gardener, sort of cast a wide net, see what happens, and then see what areas, what proposals we get in what fields, and try to then stimulate areas and watch out for areas where they're relatively barren. So there's an area of cybersecurity in particular that we aren't getting very many proposals on. The question is this area legitimately dead, or is there some blocking point that is preventing people from getting into this? And so and if so, we want to remove that, encourage it. And we also want to dampen down any sort of fads, because fads happen in research like anything else, and we don't want a whole bunch of grad students getting their PhDs in the area that's hot, and then the area collapses and suddenly we're all left barren. So in other words, we basically don't want to say this is the problem you should work on. We just want to stimulate the whole area. Okay, and as part of that, their NSF has many offices and directorates, each concentrated in a certain area. And SaTC in particular involves just 6 of those. But you should be aware that each of these directorates and offices has their own set of programs, and there are other cross-cutting programs. And we interact with a lot of them. So, for instance, there's a big data program this year, and one thing, there's what you do with a big data security proposal. So that legitimately might cross 2 different programs. And there's, of course, lots of individual programs in each of these directorates. Okay, so SaTC in particular has an extremely broad mission. Protect cyber systems, including host machines, the internet, and other cyber infrastructure from malicious behavior while preserving privacy and promoting usability. So this is a large problem, and we recognize it's multidimensional. Basically, way back in the dawn of time, like 1960s, it was only considered to be a military problem. The military was interested in stated enemies attacking their own systems. But the world has evolved a lot since then. Now we're interested in protecting our own home computers from just random people trying to sell us miscellaneous pharmaceuticals. We're interested in protecting privacy from the companies we're actually doing business with. And so the world has changed a lot. And we recognize that no longer is cybersecurity just a technical problem, but involves resources of engineering, economics, mathematics, behavioral scientists. Everything we can possibly think of needs to be thrown into it. And so, so the one thing to be clear about is when you're thinking about a SaTC proposal is that it has to fit into the SaTC mission, and especially when it's multidisciplinary. And the biggest problem that proposals have is not making it clear why this particular program should be funding your proposal. So the SaTC aim is to protect cyber systems. And the clearest way to state that is what in the cybersecurity field is known as a threat model, which basically is not necessarily and usually not formal, but usually an informal statement of what the attacker is. So if you're defending a system against attack, it depends whether the attacker is a 12-year-old kid or a nation state. And what are you assuming their goals are? Are they just trying to steal you? Are they trying to steal your credit cards, or are they just trying to steal your phone? All of these change what you have to defend against. So usually SaTC proposals state quite clearly at the top what the threats they're trying to defend against, and therefore what the mechanism that you propose later is trying to defend against. Now there's some odd cases where there legitimately isn't a reasonable threat model, but those are usually obvious, and for instance in an area where what a reasonable threat model itself is an area of research. So in order to make partly our lives easier in sorting proposals, and also try to emphasize that we want it for proposals from multiple disciplines, we've decided to just have different perspectives. So right now we have trustworthy systems, social behavior and economic perspectives, position practice, and we have a cybersecurity education track. And so each proposal must have at least one of these perspectives. Educational proposals can't be involved with any of the others, so they're separate at the moment, but all of these others can be mixed. So you can have a trustworthy systems proposal with a social behavioral and economic perspective as well. And we'll talk later in more depth about what each of these perspectives emphasizes. And as you probably know, there's 4 different kinds of proposals: small, medium, frontiers, and education, the limit on the whole number of proposals per year. Now I'll spend more time talking about this NITRD strategic plan, because I think this is probably what most people in the room are least familiar with. So NITRD is an intergovernmental organization trying to coordinate network and IT throughout federal agencies. So these are the logo of all the federal agencies involved, and you notice NSF is over there, but it also includes NSA, DARPA, Environmental Protection Agency, NASA, etc. So what the government doesn't like to do is to send blank checks to people. It doesn't like to say, okay, we're interested in cybersecurity, we'll just send a whole bunch of money to these agencies and do something reasonable. What they want to do instead is to have some assurance that money is actually has some thought given to it. So and that's part of the purpose of NITRD, is to coordinate activities across agencies. So there's approximately $4 billion a year across 14 agencies and 7 program areas, and cybersecurity information assurance is one of them. We also sometimes have interactions with the high confidence software and systems naturally. Okay, so what has happened is NITRD, and specifically cybersecurity and information assurance its area, has come up with a cybersecurity strategy saying across agencies what's important and how should we go about this. And so it should be emphasized, it's not a list of hard problems. A list of hard problems could go on forever and it's not really interesting. It's not a complete description of cybersecurity research. They didn't try to say all research fits into these buckets. It's not a list of magic keywords that will get your proposal funded if you say the magic words. And definitely it's not an equally weighted list of NSF research objectives. It's not intended to be equally weighted in the first place, even across agencies. But because it goes across agencies, and each agency has a different mandate, it's expected some agencies will resonate more with some things than others. So NSF is mainly focused on long-term scientific research, while other agencies are more focused on short-term problems that we face now. So there's going to be divides along those lines as well. So what it tries to do is to be a shared vision of desired instate across federal agencies. So assurance to the people with the money that we actually are trying to aim towards something, and trying to incentivize new ways of operating doing business. So saying, okay, this is the state of cybersecurity right now in the non-classified section, and we're trying to encourage things going into areas where it was thought that there wasn't enough work being done. And we try to establish a robust community discussion of what matters. And we've been adding thrusts and themes over time. And we also recognize that independent thinking is developed good research. Even, although there's specific thrusts, all of them are sort of broad in nature. And we expect that there's going to be diversity and what diversity. One of the things that we hope or expected that this also will help a sort of common vocabulary to happen. So if when people are talking about what research might be useful to go into, have some common language about what themes there are would be useful. So there are the strategy has 4 thrusts: inducing change, developing scientific foundations, accelerating transition to practice, and maximizing research impact. And the first one, inducing change, is actually at one point was called research objectives until it was decided to change to emphasize the fact that we're not just research areas, but each of the research areas is trying to make a change in the world. And so we have 4 parts to that, so 4 thrusts, or themes. So tailored trustworthy spaces, designed in security, moving target, and cyber economics incentives. So, tailored trustworthy spaces recognizes the fact that, okay, once upon a time, especially in cybersecurity, we were just trying to make secure systems. And that, of course, turned out to be very hard. And it also turned out to be very hard to figure out what actually secure meant. And instead, we recognize that in real life, we don't even try to do this. We have many spaces, many different characteristics: home, school, workplace, shopping mall, doctor's bank, office, theaters. All of them have different characteristics. What it makes you feel safe in your home is different from what makes you feel safe in a bank or in a doctor's office or in a shopping mall. And different behaviors and controls are appropriate for each. So instead of trying to say, we want a secure system, and realize we want a secure system for this particular issue or problem or environment. So there's 2 important words, the tailored and trustworthy. And so the tailoring specifically says, okay, we just don't want something that's secure. We want something that's secure for that particular function, policy, or requirements. Okay, so basically the idea is that we like to have systems where users can create or selective environments for different activities, can negotiate with others to create new environments, and must be able to base trust decisions in verifiable algorithms. So both words, the tailoring and trustworthy, are important in this theme. Then another one is moving target. So basically, this comes out of the common saying, a moving target is harder to hit. So traditionally, what security is a hard problem, because all attackers need is one chink in the armor to find things. And defenders are this thing of trying to make sure that everything possible is secure, and defenders and attackers just have to find one problem. So all the work basically is carried on by the poor defenders. They have to do everything. And that's, of course, is essentially a very hard game to play. And instead, we want to to try to use the idea of a moving target by forcing the attackers to do work as well. So the reason why moving targets are hard to hit is suddenly the attacker just can't spend all their time aiming at one place, but they have to keep tracking something differently. And so the idea of this is to have control change against multiple system dimensions, to make the system more complex for the attacker, increase uncertainty with them, and increase the fault tolerance within the system as well. So perfect security is unattainable, but if you make things changing in a controlled fashion, like address space randomization, so that attackers don't know where your code is loaded always, but have to do work to find out where the code they're attacking lies in memory. That is a real example of how moving target actually has made it out into the real world. Okay, and cyber economics and incentives is yet another theme. The idea is that, okay, security as a purely technical problem doesn't work very well in general. It solves certain problems, but really attackers are motivated many times by money or power, and trying to use economic incentives against them is more effective. So what are the social dimensions of cyber economics? Data on what happens, and improved software development models and support for personal data ownership. So for an example of this is spam. And there's been a lot of work in technical solutions to spam. But of course, the problem is that people are making money on this. And there's been a lot of promising work recently about where the spammers actually get paid and how much, and what's the financial infrastructure of it. And currently it seems that stopping spam seems to be possibly more effective to be stopped at the financial level, because there's only a very few number of banks which process the credit card transactions from which money enters the spam economy. And so that seems like it might be a more promising area of attack than the endless amount of spam detection algorithms. And so this thrust is trying to explore that area, saying, okay, what's actually happening in terms of money and power and incentives? Where are people incentivized to be attackers, and what can we do to change the incentives so that that is less and less profitable for them? And how do we create incentives to engage in socially responsible behavior instead of malicious behavior? Then finally we have design and security, which is the newest theme we have. So basic idea is that we want to design and develop software systems that resist new attacks, and assurance is that the systems are actually defendable. So instead of having just point solutions, this is the way to fix the problem in this current email system, or this is the way to solve this particular problem in a hypervisor. We want to incentivize thought about the entire system and design security from the beginning instead of always in the patch mode. And verify, enable reasoning about a series of quality attributes and what evidence you have the system is actually secure. So currently, that is comfortably wishy-washy. People build a system, then they do random attacks against it, and they send it out and see. People use it and see how effective it is and whether security problems arise. And that's always very, doesn't give you a very good quality of assurance that it's really secure. We are also interested in metrics or ways of determining, okay, how secure it is before you're just sending out to the world and see whether it comes crashing down. If we built buildings that way, nobody would want to live in a three-story building. Yet we've somehow seen that it's a reasonable thing to do in software security. And let's stop it. Okay, so that was all the themes as part of inducing change. Then next main thrust is developing scientific foundations. So this is a thrust instead of inducing change, because it's a more general philosophy saying that we're just in the science of security. So we have a whole bunch of knowledge gained over the years. But a lot of it is very knowledge gained either by people trying something, seeing what works or doesn't work, or thinking harder about the problem. But in a lot of the cases, it's not really organized very well. You have knowledge that's gained by people building systems in the 1970s, and there's always the thing of, does that necessarily apply to current systems? There's paradigms of just how you build secure software, which makes sense, but we don't really know measurably how well they work in real life. So we want to have a more cohesive understanding of the underlying principles and try to make sure that all the beliefs that we have, we actually know why those beliefs hold. So here's a list of sort of today's knowledge and what we want to go to. So we have a lot in cryptography about adversary models and work factor metrics and things like this. And formal analysis, and attack software engineering. And we have a community over here. What we want to get to is a more mature one. So a lot of the formal adversary models of cryptography are only applied to cryptography and not necessarily to systems in general. So there's always the problem that you have these nice proven cryptography algorithms and we try to implement them. Well, the implementations have problems. And that's, of course, uncomfortable. So we want to have adversary models and metrics that just don't apply to a nice theoretical space, but to actual real life. We want objective evaluation techniques, rigorous toolkits, repeatable evidence, trust engineering methodology with principle design and tools and a formal discipline, and a much more coordinated science and security community. And the next thrust is a summary transition to practice. So the government is, Congress basically doesn't want research to remain in ivory towers forever. Ivory tower research, especially by NSF, is wonderful. But there's always the problem that professors think of these wonderful things and then somehow it doesn't get out to the real world. And sometimes it doesn't get out to the real world for good reasons. But most of the time it's just because there's not a very good avenue of communication for taking research results and trying to get them into corporations. Corporations look at this at publicly available research and saying, my competitors already know all of this, so why should I put money into it? And oftentimes professors just don't know the correct ways to approach businessmen. Sort of the valley of death when trying to get your ideas out into the world. And Congress wants us to try to make it easier to get all these nice scientific results out into the real world. And so various, including matchmaking efforts between agencies, research and products, potential funding for the last mile, the thing where it leaves a professor's office and goes out into a venture capitalist. That's where often things break down. And we want to make it a smoother transition. And finally, we want to maximize research impact. So cybersecurity is not just a standalone topic. There's lots of other national priorities. So big data, health IT, smart grid, financial services. There's Trusted Identities in Cyberspace program. There's the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education. All of this relates to cybersecurity. And so we want, and Congress and IRD wants all these things to cooperate among each other. So big data security, health IT security, smart grid security, financial service security. We want to emphasize that as well. So all the intersections between other initiatives governmental initiatives should be taken care of as well. So in summary, and why we're actually doing this is because we're trying to encourage a coordinated effort amongst government agencies like NSF and all the others, and try to encourage focus on things that will change the game. So we want research collaborations based on practical topics and desired future capabilities. And we've outlined 4 thrusts, which we think it, and NIDRD thinks, that is game-changing some way or other. And we like to encourage work that it goes in that area. But again, I say it twice, these are not magic words that get your proposal funded. If you say moving target or tailored trustworthy space, it doesn't mean that your proposal will get funded. Basically, it's encouragement to do research which will enhance national objectives. It's not magic bullets, and we're not trying to restrict scientific research into just these 4 areas. We think actually most research will fall naturally in, well, most research done by the NSF cyberspace community will fall naturally into one or more of these themes. And so it's a way of encouraging research and not trying to discourage research. Okay, then I'll turn it off to Jeremy and we'll start off the discussion of more in-depth perspectives in SaTC.
Thanks very much.